Before we begin tonight's journey, find a comfortable place to rest. Let your breathing slow, allow the events of the day to drift quietly into the background, and imagine yourself standing on the sun-warmed shores of ancient Greece. The sea stretches endlessly before you, its gentle waves whispering against smooth stones. Olive trees sway in the evening breeze, cicadas sing from the hillsides, and somewhere in the distance, a shepherd guides his flock toward home as the golden light of sunset settles over the mountains. Tonight, we are traveling thousands of years into the past to follow the story of one of Greece's greatest heroes, Theseus. Unlike many legendary figures, Theseus was not simply remembered for defeating monsters. To the people of ancient Athens, he represented courage, wisdom, justice, and the hope that a single person could unite a divided land. His adventures became woven into the very identity of the city, inspiring artists, poets, and storytellers for centuries. Long after the temples had weathered beneath the Mediterranean sun, the name of Theseus continued to echo through history. As with so many ancient myths, the line between history and legend is beautifully blurred. There was likely no single moment when someone first told the tale exactly as we know it today. Instead, generations of storytellers added new details, reshaped familiar episodes, and passed the story from one voice to another around glowing hearths, in bustling marketplaces, and beneath the marble columns of Greek sanctuaries. Some parts may contain echoes of real Bronze Age kingdoms that flourished more than 3,000 years ago. Others belong entirely to the realm of imagination, where impossible creatures roam forgotten labyrinths, gods quietly influence the lives of mortals, and destiny waits patiently around every corner. Rather than trying to separate fact from fiction, tonight we'll simply wander through this remarkable landscape together, appreciating the story much as the ancient Greeks themselves might have. Our journey begins not inside the famous labyrinth, nor in the shadow of the fearsome Minotaur. Those well-known moments still lie far ahead. Instead, we'll begin in a quieter place, in the peaceful town of Troezen, where a child grows up without fully understanding the mystery of his own family. From there we'll walk the rocky roads of southern Greece, where forests cover the hills and travelers stop to rest beside clear springs. We'll visit the young city of Athens before it became the powerful center of philosophy and democracy remembered today. We'll cross the sparkling Aegean Sea aboard wooden ships whose white sails billow gently in the wind. We'll wander through the magnificent palace of Knossos on the island of Crete, exploring halls painted with dolphins, bulls, and graceful dancers before descending into one of mythology's most enduring mysteries. Along the way, we'll meet kings and queens, sailors and priests, clever princesses and stubborn rulers. We'll discover how ordinary people lived in the ancient Mediterranean, what they ate, how they traveled, the festivals they celebrated, and the stories they shared beneath the stars. While heroes often stand at the center of these myths, it is the world around them that gives their adventures life. This is not a tale that needs to be rushed. The roads are long, the sea is calm, and the night is young. We'll take our time, lingering beside quiet harbors, climbing gentle hills, and pausing often to admire the landscapes that inspired some of humanity's oldest surviving stories. So settle in, relax, and let the worries of the modern world slowly fade away. Together we'll step into an age where every mountain seemed to hold a legend, every island concealed another story, and every voyage promised a new horizon. This is the sleepy history of Theseus. Let us begin where every great journey starts, not with the triumphs of a celebrated hero, but with the quiet beginnings of a child whose destiny still waits, hidden beneath a heavy stone. Long before Theseus ever lifted a sword or entered the winding halls of the Labyrinth, his story began with a quiet sorrow carried by an aging king. Our journey takes us to Athens, many centuries before its famous age of philosophers, marble temples, and democratic assemblies. This was an older Athens, surrounded by rocky hills and fertile valleys, where homes were built of stone and timber, smoke curled gently from hearth fires, and shepherds led their flocks through the countryside each morning. At the heart of the city stood King Aegeus, ruler of Athens. He possessed wealth, loyal subjects, and a kingdom that looked toward him for guidance. Yet despite everything he had achieved, one troubling thought lingered in his mind. He had no heir. To us today, that may seem like a private concern, but in the ancient world, the question of succession affected an entire kingdom. Without a clear successor, rival families could compete for power, alliances could crumble, and years of peace might give way to uncertainty. As Aegeus grew older, this worry settled more heavily upon him. The ancient Greeks often believed that when human wisdom reached its limits, the gods might offer guidance. So Aegeus prepared for a long pilgrimage to one of the most sacred places in Greece, the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. The journey itself was no small undertaking. Travelers followed dusty roads that wound through olive groves, climbed rocky mountain passes, and crossed quiet valleys where small villages welcomed visitors with bread, olives, and watered wine. Along the way stood tiny shrines beside the road, each reminding travelers that every river, grove, and hillside might be watched over by a god or spirit. Eventually, Aegeus reached Delphi. Nestled high upon the slopes of Mount Parnassus, Delphi was unlike any ordinary town. The air carried the scent of burning laurel leaves and incense. Pilgrims from every corner of the Greek world gathered there, hoping to ask questions about harvests, wars, marriages, or uncertain futures. At the center of the sanctuary sat the oracle of Apollo, known as the Pythia. According to tradition, she delivered the words of the god himself, speaking mysterious prophecies that often sounded more like riddles than answers. When Aegeus asked whether he would ever have children, the oracle replied with words that puzzled everyone who heard them. "Do not loosen the mouth of the wineskin until you have returned to the height of Athens." The saying made little sense. Was it truly about a wineskin? Or did it hide another meaning entirely? Ancient prophecies were rarely straightforward. They invited careful thought, and many only became clear after events had already unfolded. Unable to understand the message, Aegeus left Delphi more confused than when he had arrived. Rather than returning directly to Athens, he stopped in the peaceful coastal city of Troezen. There ruled King Theseus, a man celebrated throughout Greece for his wisdom. Some stories describe him as one of the cleverest rulers of his age, a man skilled at interpreting difficult sayings and hidden meanings. The two kings shared a meal together, as hospitality was considered one of the highest virtues in Greek society. Guests were welcomed generously, for any stranger might be protected by Zeus himself, who watched over travelers. As evening settled over the palace, Aegeus shared the oracle's strange words. Theseus listened carefully. Whether he truly understood the prophecy or simply believed he saw an opportunity has been debated ever since. Ancient authors tell the story in different ways, but they agree on what happened next. Theseus introduced Aegeus to his daughter, Princess Aethra. That night would quietly change the course of Greek mythology. Some versions of the legend tell only of Aegeus and Aethra. Others add another layer, saying that during the same night the sea god Poseidon also visited Aethra, making Theseus both the son of a mortal king and a divine god. Like many Greek myths, the story exists in several forms, each treasured by different generations of storytellers. Before departing for Athens, Aegeus made careful preparations. Not knowing whether he would ever safely return, he placed his bronze sword and a pair of sturdy sandals beneath an enormous boulder outside Troezen. The stone was so heavy that few grown men could hope to move it. He gave Aethra a simple instruction. If the child she carried grew strong enough to lift the stone alone, she should reveal the hidden treasures beneath it. The sword and sandals would prove the young man's identity, and he should then journey to Athens to claim his rightful place beside his father. It was a quiet farewell. No crowds gathered, no trumpets sounded, Only a king carrying hope, a princess guarding a secret, and a massive stone waiting patiently beneath the warm Greek sun. Years would pass before anyone touched it again. But beneath that silent boulder rested far more than a sword and a pair of sandals. There rested the beginning of one of Greece's greatest legends. As the seasons quietly passed over the hills of southern Greece, the child destined to become one of mythology's greatest heroes grew up far from the bustling streets of Athens. His home was the peaceful city of Troezen, nestled between gentle mountains and the sparkling waters of the Saronic Gulf. Unlike Athens, which was slowly becoming a center of power, Troezen was known for its fertile farmland, quiet harbors, and sacred groves. Fishermen launched their boats each morning before sunrise, farmers tended olive trees that had stood for generations, and shepherds led goats across rocky hillsides fragrant with wild thyme and rosemary. Here, life moved at a slower rhythm. The cries of gulls mixed with the steady sound of waves brushing against the shore. Children played beneath fig trees while artisans shaped pottery, hammered bronze, or wove colorful cloth. In the evenings, families gathered outside their homes as the heat of the day faded, sharing simple meals of bread, olives, cheese, lentils, and fresh fish caught that very morning. It was in this peaceful world that Theseus spent his earliest years. His mother, Aethra, raised him with quiet affection, while his grandfather, King Pythius, oversaw his education. Pythius had earned a reputation throughout Greece as a wise ruler, and he believed that true strength required more than powerful muscles. A good leader, he taught, must also possess patience, kindness, and good judgment. Whether Theseus fully appreciated these lessons as a boy is impossible to know, but later storytellers often portrayed him as a hero who relied upon intelligence as much as courage. Like most noble children in ancient Greece, Theseus' education reached far beyond reading and writing, which were not yet widespread skills in the Bronze Age. Instead, learning came through observation, conversation, and daily practice. He learned to throw a spear with accuracy. He practiced wrestling on sandy ground beneath the watchful eyes of experienced trainers. He became skilled with the bow, learned to ride horses, and accompanied older hunters into the surrounding forests, where deer, wild boar, and hares wandered beneath towering pines and ancient oak trees. Yet his education also included music. The Greeks believed that music brought harmony not only to gatherings but also to the soul itself. Theseus likely learned to sing traditional songs accompanied by the gentle notes of the lyre, whose delicate melodies floated through homes and palace courtyards alike. Storytelling, too, formed an important part of every child's upbringing. Long before books became common, history, religion, and family traditions survived through spoken words. Around evening fires, elders recounted tales of distant kingdoms, brave explorers, clever kings, and the powerful Olympian gods who watched over the world. Young Theseus would have listened with fascination. He heard of mighty Zeus ruling from Mount Olympus, of Athena's wisdom, Poseidon's restless seas, and Hermes, swift messenger of the gods. Perhaps he imagined those divine beings walking unseen among ordinary people, just as countless Greeks believed they sometimes did. But there was one story that remained strangely absent. No one spoke openly about his father. As Theseus grew older, he surely noticed that other children knew their fathers well. They worked beside them in the fields, learned family trades, or sailed together along the coast. His own family offered only gentle smiles and carefully changed the subject. Aethra never lied to her son, but neither did she reveal the entire truth. She knew that the time had not yet come. Instead, she encouraged him to become the sort of man any father would be proud to claim. Meanwhile, a silent secret waited just beyond the city. Outside Troezen rested the enormous stone beneath which King Aegeus had hidden his bronze sword and sturdy sandals years before. The boulder became almost a quiet member of the landscape, warmed by summer sunshine, soaked by winter rains, and surrounded each spring by wildflowers blooming among the grasses. Travelers passed it without a second glance. Children likely played nearby without knowing what rested beneath. Only Aethra and Pythius understood its importance. As the years unfolded, Theseus grew unusually strong. Ancient storytellers often described him as fearless from an early age. One later tale claims that while visiting the palace of the great hero Heracles, a lion's skin had been left upon a couch. The other children mistook it for a living beast and fled in terror. Theseus, however, reportedly seized an axe and charged toward it, prepared to defend everyone in the room. Whether the event truly belonged to the oldest versions of the myth or was added centuries later, it illustrates how the Greeks imagined his character. Courage, in their eyes, seemed to belong to him almost from birth. Yet despite these signs of greatness, his childhood was not one of constant adventure. Most days were wonderfully ordinary. He watched fishermen mend their nets beside the harbor. He climbed rocky hills overlooking the sea. He helped gather olives during the autumn harvest. He wandered shaded paths where cicadas filled the warm afternoon air with their endless song. Sometimes he may have stood along the shoreline, watching ships disappear beyond the horizon, wondering what distant lands lay beyond the glittering blue water. Far away, beyond those waves, stood Athens. He had never seen it. He did not know that its aging king often thought about the child he had left behind. Nor did he know that his own future rested beneath a weathered stone, patiently waiting for the day when childhood would give way to destiny. For now, Troezen remained his entire world, a peaceful beginning before the long road that would transform an ordinary young man into one of ancient Greece's most enduring legends. The years slipped by almost unnoticed. Each spring painted the hills around Troezen with bright wildflowers. Summers filled the olive groves with the hum of cicadas. Autumn brought the harvest, while gentle winter rains washed the dusty roads clean before another cycle began. With every passing season, Theseus grew taller, stronger, and wiser. The child who had once wandered the shoreline collecting smooth stones had become a confident young man. His shoulders had broadened from years of wrestling and hunting, his hands had grown calloused from training with spear and bow, and his mind had been shaped by the careful teachings of his grandfather, King Pythius. By now, the people of Troezen had begun to notice him. Visitors remarked on his unusual strength, but they also spoke of his calm manner. He greeted fishermen returning to harbor, offered help to elderly villagers, and listened respectfully whenever experienced travelers shared stories of distant lands. These qualities mattered deeply to the Greeks, who admired not only physical excellence but also self-control and good character. Eventually, Aethra realized the moment she had quietly anticipated for nearly 2 decades had finally arrived. One clear morning, she asked her son to accompany her beyond the city. Together they walked along familiar paths that wound through olive orchards and low hills overlooking the brilliant blue sea. The air smelled of pine resin and warm earth. Small lizards darted across sunlit stones while seabirds circled high overhead. Their destination was a place Theseus had passed many times before. There, resting upon the hillside, sat the enormous boulder. It looked no different than it always had. Rain had weathered its rough surface. Moss clung to one side, and grasses swayed gently around its base. To anyone else, it was simply another ancient stone scattered across the Greek countryside. But Aethra stopped walking. She turned toward her son with a thoughtful expression. For many years she had guarded a secret entrusted to her by King Aegeus. She had watched Theseus grow into adulthood, waiting patiently until the day he possessed both the strength and the maturity required to learn the truth. That day had finally come. She told him about his father. She explained how King Aegeus, ruler of Athens, had visited Troezen many years earlier. She described the mysterious prophecy delivered at Delphi, the hidden sword and sandals, and the promise that had been made before Aegeus departed. Then she pointed toward the great stone. Beneath it, she said, rested the proof of his birth. If he could lift the boulder, he would reveal the gifts left for him and begin the journey to meet the father he had never known. For a few quiet moments, Theseus simply looked at the stone. According to the legend, no ordinary man could move it. Perhaps he walked around it first, studying its shape. Perhaps he placed both hands upon its rough surface and tested its weight. The old stories do not tell us exactly how he did it. They simply tell us that he succeeded. Slowly, the great rock shifted. Dust fell from its underside. Small insects scattered into the sunlight after years hidden beneath the stone. Pebbles rolled down the hillside as the massive boulder tipped aside. There, exactly where Aegeus had promised, lay a finely crafted bronze sword and a sturdy pair of sandals. The objects had waited patiently for nearly 20 years. Unlike the polished iron weapons familiar in later centuries, this sword belonged to the Bronze Age, when bronze remained the finest metal available for tools and arms. Though time had passed, the weapons still gleamed faintly beneath the sunlight. The sandals appeared simple, yet they carried equal importance. Together they formed unmistakable evidence of his identity. Theseus knelt and carefully picked them up. In that quiet moment, his life changed forever. The mysteries of his childhood suddenly made sense. The questions that had lingered for years finally had answers. He knew who his father was. He knew where he belonged. Yet discovering one's destiny is often easier than following it. Aethra explained that he should now travel to Athens and present the sword and sandals to King Aegeus. The king would recognize the items immediately and know that the young man standing before him was his son. There remained only one decision. How should he reach Athens? Two routes connected Troezen with the great city. The safer choice was by sea. Ships regularly crossed the calm waters of the Saronic Gulf, carrying merchants, farmers, and travelers between the coastal cities. The voyage was relatively quick and avoided many dangers. The second route was far more difficult. An overland road followed the rocky coastline, winding through forests, mountain passes, and lonely cliffs. It had earned a terrible reputation throughout Greece because it was haunted by violent bandits and ruthless criminals who preyed upon travelers. Most sensible people avoided it whenever possible. Even Aethra hoped her son would choose the safer voyage by ship. But Theseus thought differently. He had grown up listening to stories of great heroes who used their strength to protect others. If the roads were dangerous because wicked men ruled them, then perhaps someone should put an end to that danger. Some ancient writers suggest that Theseus wished to equal the fame of Heracles, whose own adventures had become legendary across Greece. Others simply say that he believed a prince should prove himself through courageous deeds before claiming a kingdom. Whatever his reasons, his choice was made. He would walk, not because it was easier, but because it was harder. With his father's sword fastened at his side and the sandals now his own, Theseus prepared to leave the peaceful home he had always known. Ahead lay dusty roads, unfamiliar faces, hidden dangers, and adventures that would soon become some of the most famous stories in all of Greek mythology. The quiet years of childhood had come to an end. The long journey to Athens had begun. With the bronze sword at his side and his father's sandals upon his feet, Theseus left the peaceful city of Troezen behind. There were no grand ceremonies to mark his departure. His mother embraced him one final time, knowing that the little boy she had raised had become a man with his own path to follow. King Theseus offered quiet words of advice rather than lengthy speeches. Wisdom, after all, often needed few words. Then, as the morning sun climbed above the hills, Theseus began walking north. The road ahead stretched for nearly 60 miles, following the rugged coastline that separated the Saronic Gulf from steep mountains. Today the distance might seem manageable by car, but in the ancient world every mile was traveled on foot or horseback. A journey of several days required careful planning, good weather, and no small measure of endurance. At first, the countryside seemed peaceful. Olive groves spread across the hillsides in neat rows, their silver-green leaves shimmering whenever a breeze swept in from the sea. Vineyards climbed sunny slopes where farmers tended grapes destined to become wine. Small orchards of figs and pomegranates surrounded simple stone cottages, while goats wandered among rocky outcrops with surprising ease. From many points along the road, Theseus could see the sparkling waters of the gulf below. Fishing boats drifted quietly near the shore, their white sails glowing in the morning light. Beyond the water lay distant islands, appearing almost blue against the hazy horizon. For long stretches, the journey may have felt wonderfully calm. Travelers often rose before sunrise to avoid the hottest hours of the afternoon. They carried water in leather skins, simple meals of bread, cheese, olives, and dried fruit, and sturdy walking staffs to help navigate uneven ground. Whenever evening approached, they searched for a village or a welcoming household where they might spend the night. Hospitality was among the most important customs in ancient Greece. The Greeks called it xenia, a sacred bond between host and guest. A stranger arriving at one's door was usually offered food, water, and a place to rest before anyone asked who they were or where they had come from. This tradition was more than simple kindness. The Greeks believed that Zeus himself protected travelers. Under the title Zeus Xenios, he watched over the laws of hospitality. To mistreat a guest was not merely rude, it risked offending the king of the gods himself. Many myths tell of gods disguising themselves as ordinary travelers, rewarding generous hosts while punishing those who turned strangers away. Because of this belief, journeys through Greece depended upon countless acts of quiet generosity. A warm fire, a shared meal, fresh water drawn from a village well. These simple comforts connected communities across the Greek world. Yet not every traveler honored these sacred customs. The road Theseus had chosen was notorious for another reason. Between Troezen and Athens, several dangerous men had made their homes in lonely valleys, mountain passes, and narrow coastal paths. Rather than welcoming travelers, they robbed them. Some delighted in cruelty for its own sake, twisting the sacred rules of hospitality into opportunities for violence. News of these outlaws spread from village to village. Merchants traveled in groups whenever possible. Families delayed journeys until they could find companions. Even experienced soldiers sometimes chose the longer sea voyage rather than risk the overland road. Aethra had understood these dangers well. That was why she had hoped her son would sail to Athens instead. But Theseus believed the difficult road offered something the sea never could. Each dangerous encounter presented an opportunity to make the countryside safer for everyone who followed. This idea reflected something important about Greek heroes. Modern stories often celebrate heroes for defeating monsters alone, but many Greek myths praised those who restored order where chaos had taken root. A hero's greatest achievement was not simply winning battles. It was leaving the world better than he found it. As Theseus walked, he likely passed shrines dedicated to Hermes, the god of travelers. Small stone altars stood beside crossroads where visitors sometimes left tiny offerings. A handful of olives, a splash of wine, or fresh flowers gathered nearby. Mountain springs offered cool drinking water. Towering pine trees cast welcome shade across the dusty path. Lizards basked upon sunlit rocks while hawks circled high above the cliffs. Everything appeared peaceful. Yet appearances could be deceiving. Beyond the next bend might stand a lonely inn, a quiet valley, a narrow cliffside path, or someone waiting for an unsuspecting traveler. Theseus did not know exactly where danger would appear, but unlike most people walking this road, he did not hope to avoid it. In many ways, he welcomed the challenge. The sword hidden beneath the stone had revealed his heritage. Now the road itself would reveal his character. With every step toward Athens, he left behind the sheltered life of Troezen. Ahead lay encounters that would transform him from an unknown young traveler into a hero whose name would be remembered for thousands of years. The first test was closer than he realized. Somewhere along the winding road, a man known for carrying a mighty bronze club was already waiting. As Theseus continued north toward Athens, the road gradually became narrower and lonelier. The villages grew farther apart, and long stretches of wilderness separated one settlement from the next. For many years, travelers had whispered the names of 6 notorious bandits who haunted this road. Each had claimed a different stretch of the journey, and each had become infamous not merely for robbery, but for cruelty. Their stories had grown into legends of their own, serving as warnings to anyone foolish enough to travel alone. Theseus would meet them one by one. The first was Periphetes, often called the club bearer. He lived near Epidaurus and carried an enormous bronze club that few men could even lift. According to the old stories, he stopped travelers and struck them down before stealing whatever they carried. When Periphetes confronted the young traveler from Troezen, he likely expected another easy victim. Instead, he met someone who refused to flee. The ancient storytellers describe a fierce struggle. In the end, Theseus defeated the bandit and claimed the heavy bronze club for himself. Just as Heracles was recognized by his lion skin, Theseus would sometimes be shown in Greek art carrying Periphetes' great weapon, a symbol that the wicked man's reign had ended. The road became a little safer. Farther north waited another outlaw named Cenes. His nickname was the Pine Bender. The stories surrounding Cenes are among the strangest in Greek mythology. He was said to force young pine trees toward the ground by tying them together. Then, after fastening unfortunate travelers to the bent trunks, he released them, allowing the trees to spring upright again with terrible force. Cenes delighted in inventing cruel punishments. Theseus defeated him using the very method Cenes had inflicted upon others, a pattern that appears throughout this part of the myth. Justice, the storyteller suggested, could sometimes return to those who ignored mercy. Continuing onward, Theseus entered the region of Crete. There, the danger came not from a man but from a fearsome wild sow. Ancient authors disagree about the details. Some describe the creature as an enormous boar that devastated farms and terrified nearby villages. Others suggest that the Cromyonian sow may have been the nickname of a particularly troublesome woman living in the area. Whatever the original story may have been, later generations remembered it as another challenge overcome during Theseus' journey. The farmers of the region could once again tend their fields in peace. The fourth encounter took place beside the sea. Here lived Sciron, whose home overlooked towering cliffs above the Saronic Gulf. Travelers approaching his dwelling were ordered to wash his feet as a sign of respect. While they knelt near the cliff's edge, Sciron would suddenly kick them into the sea below. There, according to legend, a giant turtle waited to devour the unfortunate victims. Theseus confronted Sciron and defeated him, bringing an end to the deadly trap that had haunted the coastal road. The fifth opponent was Circean, a powerful wrestler who ruled the town of Eleusis. Unlike the earlier bandits, Circean challenged every traveler to a wrestling match. Refusal was impossible. Victory was nearly unheard of. Those who lost did not leave alive. Wrestling held an honored place in Greek culture, celebrated during athletic festivals and admired as a test of strength and skill. Circean, however, had turned an honorable sport into an instrument of fear. Theseus accepted the challenge. Rather than relying upon brute strength alone, he used technique, balance, and patience. The myths say he defeated Circean fairly, demonstrating that intelligence often proved stronger than raw power. The final outlaw was perhaps the most famous. His name was Procrustes. He offered weary travelers what sounded like a generous gift, a bed for the night. Hospitality, once again, appeared to greet the traveler. But the kindness was false. If a guest was too short for the bed, Procrustes stretched them until they fit. If they were too tall, he shortened them instead. Every visitor was forced to match the bed, rather than allowing the bed to fit the traveler. The story has survived for thousands of years because it carries a lesson beyond the myth itself. Even today, people sometimes speak of a Procrustean bed when describing rules that force everyone into the same rigid pattern, regardless of their differences. Theseus ended Procrustes' cruel deception by making him experience his own punishment. With that final encounter, the dangerous road was transformed. Whether these six figures were once real outlaws whose stories grew larger over time, or entirely mythical creations, historians cannot say with certainty. Some scholars believe they may symbolize the gradual taming of the countryside around Athens, where dangerous routes eventually became safe enough for trade and travel. Whatever the truth, the ancient Greeks saw something deeper in these adventures. Theseus was not wandering in search of glory alone. At every stop along the road, he left the land safer than he had found it. Farmers could work their fields without fear. Merchants could carry their goods more confidently. Families could travel roads that had once been avoided. By the time the walls of Athens finally appeared on the horizon, word of the young traveler had already begun to spread. The unknown son of King Aegeus was no longer merely walking toward his destiny. He was becoming a hero with every step. After many days on the road, the hills gradually opened before Theseus, revealing the destination he had imagined since childhood: Athens. At this point in history, it was not yet the grand city of gleaming marble temples that we often picture today. The famous Parthenon would not be built for many centuries. Instead, Athens was a growing Bronze Age kingdom clustered around a rocky hill known as the Acropolis, whose steep slopes offered both protection and sweeping views of the surrounding countryside. From a distance, the city appeared almost to rise naturally from the landscape. Stone houses gathered along winding streets. Small farms stretched into the fertile plain below. Beyond the city walls, shepherds watched their flocks while merchants guided donkeys loaded with pottery, grain, and olive oil toward the busy marketplaces. The air carried familiar sounds. Blacksmiths hammered glowing bronze into tools and weapons. Potters turned their wheels with practiced hands. Children chased one another through narrow lanes while women gathered water from public wells. The smell of baking bread drifted from clay ovens, mingling with the sense of wood smoke and crushed olives. For Theseus, this was more than another city. Somewhere inside lived the father he had never met. As he entered Athens, however, he did not immediately announce who he was. The old stories suggest that news of his victories along the dangerous road had already reached the city. Travelers who had witnessed the downfall of the six bandits carried remarkable tales wherever they stopped. Before long, rumors spread that a powerful young stranger was approaching Athens after clearing the roads that had long troubled the kingdom. Not everyone welcomed such news. Among those living in the royal palace was Medea. Many listeners may already recognize her name from another famous Greek myth. Medea was a princess from the distant land of Colchis and a gifted sorceress whose adventures with Jason and the Argonauts had already become legendary. After leaving Jason, Later traditions tell us that she eventually found refuge in Athens and became closely associated with King Aegeus. The ancient sources do not all agree on every detail of her time there, but many versions say that Aegeus hoped she might help secure the future of his kingdom. When word arrived describing the extraordinary young traveler, Medea became suspicious. Some stories say she recognized Theseus immediately. Others suggest that she simply feared anyone strong enough to challenge the existing order at court. Either way, she advised King Aegeus that the stranger might be dangerous. The aging king had no reason to question her warning. After all, he had not seen his infant son for nearly 20 years. How could he possibly recognize the grown man standing outside his gates? Unaware of their true relationship, Aegeus invited Theseus into the palace as a guest. Once again, we find the ancient Greek tradition of hospitality at work. Even rulers were expected to welcome travelers, offering food and shelter before asking difficult questions. Imagine the quiet tension surrounding the banquet. A father and son sat beneath the same roof for the first time. Neither embraced the other. Neither spoke of family. One knew the truth. The other did not. According to the best-known version of the myth, Medea secretly prepared a poisoned cup of wine for the unsuspecting guest. She hoped to remove the mysterious newcomer before his identity could become known. As servants filled the drinking cups, Theseus reached for the meal before him. To cut the roasted meat, he drew the bronze sword that Aegeus had hidden beneath the great stone so many years before. The king froze. He recognized it instantly. No ordinary weapon could have stirred such memories. This was the very sword he had left behind in Troezen, together with the sandals that only his true son could possess. The poisoned cup was struck aside before Theseus could drink from it. Some versions say Aegeus knocked it from his hand himself. Others simply say the poison was never consumed once the truth became clear. The danger had passed. At last, father recognized son. One can imagine the relief that filled the room. For years, Aegeus had worried that he would leave no heir to guide Athens after his death. Now, standing before him was the young man whose courage had already become known throughout Greece. Theseus had fulfilled the promise made before his birth. The long wait beneath the stone had ended. Not everyone celebrated. The myths tell us that Medea quickly realized her plans had failed. Knowing that her position at court was no longer secure, she departed Athens, disappearing from the story almost as suddenly as she had entered it. The palace itself grew quieter. Father and son finally had time to speak, not as strangers, but as family. There must have been countless questions. Aegeus wished to hear about Troezen, about Aethra, and about the remarkable journey that had brought Theseus safely to Athens. Theseus, in turn, finally met the man whose absence had shaped his entire childhood. Yet even as the kingdom rejoiced, another shadow lingered over Athens. The city was not truly free. Across the sparkling waters of the Aegean Sea, the powerful island kingdom of Crete demanded a terrible tribute, one that filled every Athenian household with quiet dread. Before long, Theseus would hear that story as well, and it would lead him toward the greatest adventure of his life. Although the arrival of Theseus brought joy to King Aegeus, the kingdom of Athens was far from peaceful. The markets remained busy, ships continued to arrive in the harbor, and farmers still worked the surrounding fields. At first glance, life appeared much the same as it had before. Yet beneath these ordinary routines lingered a quiet sadness that every Athenian understood. It was a sorrow that returned at regular intervals, like the changing of the seasons. For many years, Athens had been forced to pay a terrible tribute to the powerful island kingdom of Crete. The The story of how this burden began reaches back to another generation. Across the Aegean Sea ruled King Minos, whose palace at Knossos was said to be the greatest in the Greek world. Long before Athens rose to prominence, Crete had become wealthy through trade. Its ships crossed the Mediterranean carrying olive oil, pottery, fine textiles, and beautifully crafted goods. To many Greeks, Minos represented the power and splendor of a civilization older than their own. Like all great rulers of mythology, however, his story was complicated. According to the ancient legends, Minos had a son named Androgeus. Handsome, athletic, and admired wherever he traveled, Androgeus journeyed to Athens to compete in games and festivals. There he proved so talented that he won victory after victory. What happened next depends upon which ancient author tells the tale. Some claimed the jealous Athenians arranged for his death. Others believed he was sent to hunt the fearsome Marathonian bull and was killed during the attempt. Still others suggested he was attacked by rivals who feared his growing fame. Whatever the cause, one fact remained unchanged throughout nearly every version of the myth. Androgeus never returned home. King Minos was overcome with grief. Soon, grief became anger. The legends say that Minos gathered his fleets and sailed against Athens. Whether this represented an actual war remembered through mythology or simply a symbolic tale of Cretan dominance, historians cannot say with certainty. Archaeologists have found evidence that Bronze Age Crete was indeed a powerful maritime civilization, and some scholars wonder whether distant memories of that influence eventually became woven into the legend of Theseus. In the myth, Athens could not withstand the might of Minos. To end the conflict, King Aegeus agreed to harsh terms. Every 9 years, though some ancient writers say every year, Athens would send 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete. There, they would be offered to the Minotaur. Even speaking the creature's name filled people with unease. The Minotaur was said to possess the body of a man but the head of a great bull. It lived deep within an enormous labyrinth beneath the palace of Knossos, wandering endless corridors from which no one could escape. The Greeks loved stories that blended human and animal forms. Such creatures often symbolized the untamed forces of nature or the dangers hidden within the human heart. Whether anyone ever believed a Minotaur truly existed mattered less than what the monster represented. Plus, the unknown. For the families of Athens, the tribute was heartbreak made real. Imagine living in the city as the appointed year approached. Parents would quietly count the days. Young people who had only recently celebrated festivals with friends suddenly faced the possibility that their names might be chosen. Neighbors spoke in softer voices. The usual laughter of the marketplace faded. No family, whether wealthy or poor, could feel entirely safe. Some versions of the story say volunteers stepped forward. Others describe a lottery. Either way, 14 young Athenians eventually found themselves preparing for a voyage from which no one expected them to return. The harbor became a place of tearful farewells. Ships that ordinarily carried merchants and fishermen now carried precious sons and daughters away from everything they had ever known. The white sails disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving grieving families to wonder if they would ever see their loved ones again. They never did. As Theseus settled into life in Athens, he listened carefully to these stories. He walked through the city and noticed how respectfully people spoke of those who had been lost. He saw parents watching their children with quiet concern. He sensed the heavy burden his father carried. King Aegeus was not only a ruler, he was expected to choose, or at least permit, the sending of Athens' finest young people to a fate no parent wished to imagine. For years, he had endured this painful duty because he believed there was no other choice. But Athens had changed. The unknown traveler who had entered the city was now recognized as the king's son. He had already defeated 6 notorious bandits without hesitation. He had restored peace to the roads. Perhaps, some began to wonder, he might also free Athens from the shadow that had darkened it for so long. When the time came to prepare another tribute, the people gathered once again at the harbor. 14 young Athenians stood ready to board the waiting ship. This time, however, there would be one unexpected passenger among them. The Prince of Athens had quietly made his decision. Rather than sending others to face the darkness alone, Theseus would sail to Crete himself. The calm waters of the Aegean awaited, carrying him toward the greatest challenge of his life and the labyrinth from which no traveler had ever returned. The decision had been made. The next tribute to Crete would not leave Athens carrying only frightened young men and women hoping to survive an impossible fate. It would carry Theseus. When the people of Athens learned that their new prince intended to join the tribute, many were filled with both admiration and fear. They had heard the stories of his journey from Troezen, of the bandits defeated along the road, and of the courage he had shown when facing danger. But Crete was different. The criminals of the mainland had been powerful men. The challenge waiting across the sea was something far more terrifying. The Minotaur. For generations, Athens had sent 14 of its children into the unknown. No warrior, no champion, and no clever traveler had ever returned to tell what happened inside the labyrinth. Yet Theseus believed that someone had to end the suffering. Before his departure, King Aegeus spoke privately with his son. The joy of finally finding Theseus had only recently entered his life, and now he faced the possibility of losing him. The old king understood the heart of a father, and he could not easily accept sending his only son into danger. Some versions of the myth say Aegeus begged him to reconsider. Others describe a quieter conversation where the king respected Theseus' choice but carried deep worry in his heart. Either way, one final promise was made. If Theseus returned safely from Crete, the ship would raise white sails as it approached Athens. If the black sails remained, Aegeus would know that his son had failed. The simple change of a sail would carry the weight of a father's entire world. With preparations complete, the Athenian ship waited in the harbor. Ancient Greek ships were not like the large sailing vessels of later centuries. They were carefully designed for the waters of the Mediterranean, built from sturdy wooden planks and powered by both sails and rows of oars. The ships were narrow and graceful, able to move quickly through calm waters. Their design allowed sailors to navigate between islands, follow coastlines, and transport goods across great distances. Life aboard such a vessel was simple but demanding. Sailors slept on the deck or beneath small coverings that offered protection from the wind and spray. Food had to be stored carefully because fresh supplies were limited. Water was precious, and every journey depended on favorable weather. The sea itself was both a highway and a mystery. To the Greeks, the Aegean was filled with beauty and danger. Countless islands dotted its blue waters, each with its own stories, traditions, and sacred places. Sailors learned to read the winds, follow the stars, and recognize familiar landmarks along distant shores. They knew that Poseidon, god of the sea, could provide calm waters one day and unleash terrible storms the next. As the ship departed Athens, those remaining on shore watched quietly. Families said their final goodbyes. Parents held their children tightly. Friends exchanged words they hoped would not become last memories. The ship slowly moved away from the harbor, its oars cutting through the water in steady rhythm. The The sounds of the city faded behind them until only the sea remained. For the young Athenians aboard, the voyage must have felt unreal. Just days earlier, they had been living ordinary lives. They had walked familiar streets, eaten meals with their families, and slept safely beneath their own roofs. Now they sailed toward a distant island where legends spoke of a monster waiting underground. Yet among them stood Theseus. Unlike the others, he was not traveling only toward danger. He was traveling toward a purpose. As the days passed, the ship crossed the open waters of the Aegean. The passengers would have watched islands rise from the horizon like distant shadows. They passed rocky coastlines where ancient villages clung to hillsides. They sailed beneath endless blue skies, where seabirds followed the ship and dolphins occasionally appeared beside the bow. At night, the world became quiet. The sailors rested beneath the stars, guided by constellations that had watched over Mediterranean travelers for thousands of years. The gentle movement of the waves created a rhythm unlike anything on land. Perhaps Theseus spent those nights thinking about everything behind him. The peaceful home of Troezen, his mother, Aethra, the father he had only recently found, the people of Athens who now placed their hopes upon him. Ahead waited Crete, the island of Minos, the palace of Knossos, and somewhere hidden within that legendary place was the Labyrinth. The Greeks imagined Crete as a land of extraordinary wealth and ancient power. Its cities were older than Athens, its ships traveled farther, and its rulers commanded respect throughout the Mediterranean world. When the Athenian ship finally approached the island, the passengers would have seen a landscape unlike their own. Tall mountains rose behind fertile plains. Olive trees covered the valleys. Villages and ports stretched along the coast. And somewhere beyond those peaceful shores stood the palace where their fate would be decided. The voyage across the wine-dark sea had ended, but the true journey was only beginning. For Theseus, the greatest test was not surviving the waves. It was entering the heart of Crete and facing the mystery that had haunted Athens for so long. As the Athenian ship approached the shores of Crete, the passengers would have seen a land unlike any they had ever known. The island rose from the sea in layers of golden hills, fertile valleys, and towering mountains. Unlike the rugged landscapes surrounding Athens, Crete appeared ancient and prosperous, shaped by centuries of trade, farming, and exploration. Olive trees covered the countryside. Vineyards stretched across gentle slopes. Small villages rested near the coastline, their inhabitants living beneath the protection of a kingdom whose influence reached far beyond the island itself. To the Greeks of later centuries, Crete represented a world that had almost vanished into memory, a place of wealthy kings, powerful ships, and magnificent palaces. At the center of this world stood Knossos, the legendary palace of King Minos. When Theseus and the Athenian tribute arrived, they entered a place that must have seemed almost impossible compared with the simpler settlements they knew at home. The palace was not merely a royal residence. It was a vast center of government, ceremony, storage, and daily life. Its many rooms connected through winding corridors and courtyards, creating a complex that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Later generations would associate this place with the labyrinth of myth. And standing among its many passages, it is easy to understand why. The palace contained countless chambers, stairways, and halls. Light entered through carefully designed openings, illuminating colorful walls covered with painted scenes of nature and ceremony. Dolphins appeared to swim across the walls. Flowers and plants decorated rooms. Graceful figures danced in elaborate clothing. Large bulls appeared again and again in the artwork, reflecting their importance in Minoan culture. To the people of Crete, the bull was more than an animal. It represented strength, power, and perhaps a connection between humans and the divine world. This symbolism would eventually become central to the legend of the Minotaur. As Theseus walked through Knossos, he would have encountered a civilization far more sophisticated than many outsiders imagined. The Minoans, the people who built this remarkable society, were skilled sailors and traders. Their ships traveled throughout the eastern Mediterranean, connecting Crete with Egypt, the islands of the Aegean, and distant coastal kingdoms. Their merchants exchanged pottery, metals, textiles, and luxury goods. Their artists created works of incredible detail. Their builders designed structures that demonstrated remarkable engineering knowledge. Even thousands of years later, the remains of their world continue to reveal a society filled with creativity and complexity. But beneath the beauty of Knossos was a darker reality. This was the kingdom that demanded tribute from Athens. This was the home of King Minos, the ruler whose grief and anger had created generations of suffering. And somewhere within this powerful palace was said to be the creature that haunted every Athenian dream: the Minotaur. Ancient stories describe the labyrinth as a massive maze built by the master craftsman Daedalus. It was designed so cleverly that anyone who entered would become hopelessly lost, unable to find the exit. Whether the labyrinth was a literal underground maze or a mythical explanation for the confusing layout of the palace itself, the image became one of the most enduring symbols in Greek mythology. A place where paths twisted endlessly. A place where danger waited around every corner. A place where courage and intelligence mattered more than strength alone. Before facing that darkness, however, Theseus would have first encountered the world of King Minos. The king who ruled Crete lived surrounded by wealth and ceremony. Servants moved through the palace carrying food, clothing, and offerings. Officials recorded goods entering and leaving the kingdom. Musicians performed during celebrations. Visitors from distant lands brought gifts and stories from beyond the sea. From the outside, it appeared to be a paradise. But power often carries its own burdens. The tribute from Athens was a reminder of Minos' authority. Every few years, young people arrived from across the sea, knowing they had been sent into a place from which no one returned. The arrival of Theseus and his companions would have been watched carefully. They were not ordinary visitors. They represented a defeated city. They arrived as a reminder of Athens' submission. Yet among them stood a young man who did not appear defeated. Theseus carried himself differently. He had crossed the sea willingly. He had already faced danger and survived. And while others looked upon Crete with fear, he studied it with curiosity. The halls of Knossos held many mysteries. The language spoken there was unfamiliar. The customs were different. The palace itself seemed to hold secrets within every painted wall and shadowed passage. Perhaps Theseus wondered what awaited him. Perhaps he thought about the people of Athens watching from across the sea. Perhaps he remembered his father's final request and the promise of the white sails. But one question remained above all others. Where was the labyrinth? And what truly waited inside? The answer would soon lead Theseus away from the bright halls of Knossos and into the darkness beneath them. But before he could enter the maze, he would meet someone who would change the course of his journey forever. A princess of Crete, Ariadne. Inside the magnificent halls of Knossos, Theseus and the Athenian tribute waited for their fate. The journey across the sea was over, but the true danger had only just begun. The young men and women from Athens had entered a world far removed from their own. They were strangers in a powerful kingdom, surrounded by unfamiliar customs and watched carefully by the servants and guards of King Minos. To the people of Crete, these visitors represented a long-standing tradition of victory and submission. To the Athenians, they represented something much more painful. They were the price their city had been forced to pay for years. Yet among the frightened group stood Theseus, whose thoughts were focused not on fear, but on purpose. He had crossed the sea willingly. He had entered Crete knowing exactly what waited for him. The Minotaur, the creature that had haunted Athens for generations. The monster that had turned the word tribute into a symbol of grief. But before Theseus could enter the labyrinth, he would meet someone who saw him not as a sacrifice, but as a person. Her name was Ariadne. Princess Ariadne was the daughter of King Minos and Queen Pasiphae. Like many figures in Greek mythology, her story exists somewhere between history and legend. She belonged to the royal family of Crete, a world of wealth, power, and ancient traditions. Yet despite her privileged position, Ariadne lived beneath the same shadow as everyone else. She knew about the creature hidden beneath the palace. She knew that young Athenians arrived every few years, never to return. And she knew that her own father allowed this terrible ritual to continue. The myths do not tell us exactly when Ariadne first noticed Theseus. Perhaps she saw him among the other Athenian prisoners as they were brought before the king. Perhaps she heard stories about the young hero who had defeated criminals along the road from Troezen to Athens. Perhaps she simply recognized something different in him. Where others saw a doomed victim, she saw determination. Where others saw a stranger, she saw someone willing to challenge the impossible. Whatever the reason, Ariadne became deeply moved by his courage. Some versions of the story describe it as love at first sight. Others suggest something more gradual, a connection formed between two people who found themselves trapped by the choices of others. Ariadne understood the danger ahead. The labyrinth had been designed by Daedalus, the greatest craftsman of the age. It was not simply a building with many rooms. It was a place created to confuse the mind itself. Even if someone survived the Minotaur, escaping afterwards seemed impossible. Ariadne knew that strength alone would not be enough. A warrior could defeat a monster and still remain trapped forever. Theseus needed a way out. Quietly, Ariadne approached him. Imagine that moment in the vast palace of Knossos. The sounds of the court continued around them. Servants carried offerings through decorated halls. Guards watched over the prisoners. The voices of nobles echoed beneath painted ceilings. Yet within that busy palace, a secret agreement was formed between a princess and a stranger. Ariadne offered Theseus something more valuable than a weapon, a chance to return home. She gave him a simple ball of thread. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Before entering the labyrinth, Theseus would tie one end of the thread near the entrance. As he moved deeper into the maze, the thread would follow behind him. After facing the Minotaur, he could retrace his steps by following the path back to freedom. It was not brute force that would save him. It was patience, preparation, and the kindness of someone willing to help. This idea reveals something important about ancient Greek storytelling. Heroes were often celebrated for their strength, but the greatest victories rarely came from strength alone. Cleverness, wisdom, and the help of others were equally important. Odysseus had his intelligence, Perseus had divine gifts, and Theseus had Ariadne. As the day of the sacrifice approached, preparations were made. The Athenians knew what awaited them. The quiet conversations among them must have carried sadness and uncertainty. Some may have prayed to the gods. Others may have thought of their families far away. Theseus, however, prepared himself. The sword he carried represented his father and his birthright. The thread represented Ariadne and the possibility of hope. Together, they represented two different kinds of strength: the courage to face danger and the wisdom to overcome it. Soon, the doors of the labyrinth would open. The young prince of Athens would step into the darkness beneath Knossos. Behind him would be the world he knew. Ahead would be twisting corridors, unanswered questions, and a creature no one had ever defeated. But Theseus would not enter empty-handed. He carried a sword, he carried a thread, and he carried the hopes of everyone who dreamed of seeing Athens free. The day finally arrived. The moment that generations of Athenians had feared had come once again. The doors of the labyrinth waited. For those chosen as tribute, the journey ended here. They had crossed the sea, entered the palace of their enemies, and now stood before the entrance to the place from which no one was believed to have returned. But among them stood Theseus. He was not there to accept a fate chosen for him. He was there to change the fate of everyone who would come after him. The entrance to the labyrinth existed somewhere beneath or near the palace of Knossos, according to the ancient stories. The myths describe it as an immense maze designed by Daedalus, a craftsman whose genius was matched only by his ability to create things that seemed impossible. The labyrinth was more than a collection of corridors. It was a place where direction disappeared, where every turn looked like the last, where the human mind could become its own enemy. In a world before maps and modern navigation, the idea of becoming lost carried a special kind of fear. A person could enter a forest and lose the path home. A sailor could vanish into endless waters. A traveler could follow the wrong road and never find civilization again. The labyrinth combined all these fears into one place. It represented confusion itself. As Theseus stood at the entrance, Ariadne's gift remained his greatest hope: the thread. Before stepping into the darkness, he secured one end near the doorway. Then he began to move forward, allowing the thread to trail behind him. Step by step, turn by turn, the bright world above slowly disappeared. The air became cooler. The distant voices of servants vanished until only his own footsteps remained. The walls surrounded him. Ancient stories often describe the labyrinth as a place of endless darkness, but the reality may have been somewhat different. A complex structure like the Palace of Knossos could have contained many enclosed rooms, narrow passageways, and confusing routes that inspired later storytellers to imagine an impossible maze. The legend transformed architecture into something mythical. A building became a symbol, a place became a challenge, and a journey became a test of the human spirit. As Theseus traveled deeper, he would have had only his senses to guide him. The faint sound of his footsteps, the feeling of stone beneath his hands, the careful memory of each turn, the thread behind him quietly marking the path back. In many Greek myths, darkness represents more than a physical place. Heroes often descend into hidden worlds before they can truly understand themselves. They enter caves, underground kingdoms, or distant lands where they must face fears that cannot be avoided. The labyrinth was such a place for Theseus. It was not only where he would meet the Minotaur, it was where he would prove who he truly was. Eventually, deep within the maze, Theseus reached the center. There waited the creature that had brought terror to Athens for so long, the Minotaur. The ancient stories describe it as a being with the body of a man and the head of a bull. It was said to be the result of a terrible curse involving King Minos, Queen Pasiphae, and a sacred white bull sent by the god Poseidon. According to the myth, the creature had been hidden away because of its frightening nature. King Minos commanded Daedalus to create the Labyrinth as a prison, a place where the Minotaur could remain forever separated from the outside world. For years, the monster had lived alone. It had become the symbol of everything people feared. But standing before it, Theseus saw more than a legend. He saw the final obstacle between Athens and freedom. The stories do not describe the battle in great detail. Perhaps that is because the Greeks were less interested in the exact movements of the fight than in what the struggle represented. Two forces met in the darkness: human courage and uncontrollable fear. The Minotaur represented chaos. Theseus represented order. The creature was powerful, but Theseus possessed something it did not: purpose. He was fighting not only for himself, but for the 14 young Athenians who had entered the labyrinth beside him. He was fighting for the families waiting across the sea. He was fighting for a future where Athens would no longer surrender its children. With his sword in hand, Theseus faced the monster. The battle was fierce. The Minotaur's strength filled the narrow chamber. The walls echoed with the sounds of the struggle. But eventually, the hero of Athens prevailed. The creature that had haunted the dreams of generations was defeated. For the first time in many years, silence returned to the center of the labyrinth. The Minotaur was gone, but Theseus still faced one final challenge. The battle had been won. The way home remained hidden. Without Ariadne's thread, victory would have meant little. He could have defeated the monster and still remained trapped forever in the endless maze. But the thread waited, a simple line connecting him to the entrance. A reminder that courage alone is not enough. Even the strongest heroes need wisdom, preparation, and the help of others. Slowly, Theseus followed the thread back through the twisting corridors. Each step brought him closer to the world above, closer to the sunlight, closer to freedom. And somewhere beyond the walls of the labyrinth, Ariadne waited to discover whether her plan had succeeded. The monster was defeated. The impossible had been accomplished. But the story of Theseus was not finished. For escaping the labyrinth was only the beginning of the journey home. For the first time in many years, the center of the labyrinth was silent. The creature that had filled Athens with fear was gone. The Minotaur, the monster hidden beneath the palace of Knossos, had been defeated by Theseus. The impossible task that had claimed countless lives had finally been accomplished. But victory inside the labyrinth was only half of the challenge. The darkness remained. The twisting corridors remained. And the way back to the world above was still hidden. In the quiet chamber where the battle had taken place, Theseus stood for a moment and gathered himself. The sword in his hand had done what it was meant to do, but the weapon alone had never been enough. Without Ariadne's help, he might have remained trapped forever. This was the lesson of the labyrinth. Strength could win a battle, but wisdom was what brought a person home. Carefully, Theseus found the thread he had left behind. A simple strand of fiber stretching through the endless passages. To anyone else, it might have appeared insignificant. Yet that small thread represented hope, preparation, and trust. It connected the darkness of the maze with the sunlight waiting outside. Slowly, Theseus began following it. The journey back was almost the opposite of the one before. When he entered the labyrinth, every step had carried uncertainty. Each turn could have led toward danger, and every shadow seemed to hide something unknown. Now, the same corridors felt different. The monster was gone. The fear had lifted. The path that once seemed impossible had become a road toward freedom. As he walked, the young hero may have reflected on how much had changed. Not long ago, he was an unknown traveler leaving Troezen. Then he became the son of a king. then a defender of Athens. Now he had accomplished what no one else had dared to attempt. The thread guided him upward, through narrow passageways, past cold stone walls, around corners that had once seemed endless, until finally the darkness began to fade. A faint glow appeared ahead. Fresh air reached him. The sound of the outside world slowly returned. The entrance was near. When Theseus finally stepped out of the labyrinth, he returned not only as a survivor, but as a symbol of hope. Waiting outside was Ariadne, the princess who had risked everything to help him. Without her, the story would have ended differently. Ancient Greek myths often celebrate heroes, but they also remind us that no great achievement happens alone. Behind every legendary figure are often people whose courage appears quieter but is just as important. Ariadne did not defeat the Minotaur. She did not carry the sword. She did not enter the maze. Instead, she offered the one thing Theseus needed most: a way out. The reunion between Theseus and Ariadne marked a moment of relief after days of uncertainty. The Athenians who had entered Crete expecting death had survived. The terrible tribute that had haunted their city was finally broken. But their victory could not be celebrated for long. They were still in Crete. They were still surrounded by the power of King Minos. The kingdom that had demanded sacrifices for years would not simply allow its greatest secret to disappear without consequence. The group had to leave quickly. The ship that had carried them from Athens waited at the harbor. The sails were prepared. The oars were ready. There was no time to linger among the halls of Knossos. Together, Theseus and the Athenians hurried toward the coast. Behind them remained the palace, the labyrinth, and the memory of the impossible challenge they had overcome. Ahead waited the open sea. The journey home had begun. As the ship moved away from Crete, the passengers could finally breathe freely. The fear that had followed them since Athens slowly began to fade. They had survived. They had defeated the monster. They were returning home. For Theseus, the voyage carried another meaning as well. He was returning to his father. King Aegeus had waited anxiously in Athens, hoping that his son would come back safely. Before leaving, they had made their promise about the sails. If Theseus lived, the ship would raise white sails. If the black sails remained, the king would know the worst had happened. The promise seemed simple, but in the ancient world, where news traveled only as quickly as people and ships could carry it, symbols mattered deeply. A distant sail on the horizon could change someone's entire life. For now, however, the travelers enjoyed the calm waters beneath them. The seas stretched endlessly around the ship. The islands of Greece passed slowly in the distance. The wind filled the sails as they moved toward home. After years of fear, Athens would soon hear remarkable news. The Minotaur was defeated. The tribute was ended. The prince had returned. But even the greatest victories can be followed by unexpected sorrow. And as the ship continued across the Aegean Sea, one small detail remained forgotten: the sails, the symbol that would decide the fate of a father waiting on the shore. The journey home had begun. After escaping the labyrinth and leaving the shores of Crete behind, Theseus and the Athenians sailed north across the Aegean Sea. The greatest danger seemed to be behind them. The Minotaur was defeated, the labyrinth had been escaped, and the terrible tribute that had taken so many lives was finally ended. For the first time in many days, there was a sense of relief. The ship moved gently across the water, carried by favorable winds. The passengers who had once traveled toward Crete in fear could now look toward the horizon with hope. They had survived. They were going home. Among those aboard was Ariadne. The princess of Crete had abandoned the safety of her father's palace to help Theseus. She had betrayed the expectations placed upon her and chosen instead to follow the stranger who had entered the darkness of the labyrinth. Her decision changed the course of the story. Without Ariadne, Theseus may never have escaped. Without Ariadne, Athens may have continued sending young people to their deaths. Now she sailed away from the only home she had ever known. The ancient myths tell different versions of what happened next. One of the most famous places connected to Ariadne's story is the island of Naxos, a beautiful island in the Cyclades surrounded by the blue waters of the Aegean. According to many later versions of the myth, Theseus and Ariadne stopped there during their journey home. The reasons for what happened afterward remain uncertain. Some ancient storytellers say that Theseus abandoned Ariadne on the island. Others say the gods themselves became involved. The most famous version tells that the god Dionysus discovered Ariadne on Naxos and fell in love with her, eventually making her his wife and placing a crown among the stars in her honor. Like many Greek myths, this part of the story changed over time. Different communities told different versions. Some remembered Ariadne as a tragic figure left behind. Others celebrated her as a woman chosen by a god and lifted into immortality. The uncertainty itself reflects something important about mythology. These stories were not fixed like words written on a page. They were living traditions. Each generation added new details, emphasized different characters, and found new meanings in familiar events. Yet no matter which version people preferred, Naxos became forever connected with Ariadne. Imagine the island as it may have appeared thousands of years ago. Golden beaches stretched along the shore. White houses stood among olive trees and rocky hills. Fishing boats rested quietly in sheltered bays. The evening sun painted the mountains with warm shades of orange and purple. It was a place of beauty and peace, a place where someone might believe that a new life could begin. For Theseus, however, the journey could not stop there. Athens was waiting. His father was waiting. The promise of the white sails remained. The hero who had entered the labyrinth had another responsibility waiting beyond the sea. The stories do not always explain Theseus' thoughts during this part of the journey. Was he distracted by exhaustion after the ordeal? Was he overwhelmed by the weight of everything that had happened? Did he believe Ariadne would be safe? Ancient storytellers left these questions unanswered. Perhaps that is part of what makes the legend endure. Heroes are often remembered for their greatest victories, but myths also reveal their imperfections. Theseus could defeat monsters and overcome impossible challenges, yet he was still human. He could be brave and uncertain, wise and careless, compassionate and flawed. The Greeks understood that their heroes were never perfect. Their greatness came not from being without mistakes, but from the choices they made afterward. Leaving Naxos behind, Theseus continued toward Athens. The ship sailed across familiar waters. The coastline of Greece slowly grew closer. The travelers began thinking about home. Families who had spent years grieving would soon see their loved ones again. The people of Athens would finally be free from the burden imposed by King Minos. And King Aegeus would finally welcome his son home. But as the ship approached the final part of its journey, something important had been forgotten. The black sails still hung from the mast. The white sails that Aegeus had asked to see had not been raised. Far away, on the rocky heights overlooking Athens, an old king watched the horizon. Every day, he searched the sea for a sign. Every day, he waited, and soon he would see a ship approaching. A ship carrying his son. A ship carrying both joy and tragedy. Because sometimes, even after the greatest victory, a single forgotten promise can change everything. The ship carrying Theseus and the Athenians continued its journey across the Aegean Sea. After leaving the shores of Crete, the travelers sailed beneath endless skies, carried forward by the steady rhythm of the waves. Behind them remained the palace of Knossos, the Labyrinth, and the terrible creature that had brought so much suffering to Athens. Ahead waited home. For the young Athenians who had survived, the voyage must have felt almost dreamlike. They had left their city believing they would never return. Their families had prepared themselves for grief, and their friends had already begun mourning their absence. Yet now they were alive. The Minotaur was defeated. The tribute was ended. They carried with them a story that would be repeated for generations. At the center of that story stood Theseus, the young prince who had entered the darkness and returned victorious. But while those aboard the ship celebrated their success, one small detail had been forgotten: the sails. Before Theseus left Athens, his father had made one request. If the journey ended in tragedy, the ship would return with black sails. If Theseus survived, the ship would raise white sails as a signal of victory. It was a simple promise, a small change of fabric against the vast blue sky. Yet for King Aegeus, those sails represented everything. They were the difference between hope and despair. As the ship sailed homeward, the crew remained focused on reaching Athens safely. They had survived storms, uncertainty, and the dangers of Crete. Their thoughts were likely filled with exhaustion and relief. Perhaps no one noticed the black sails still hanging from the mast. Perhaps everyone assumed someone else had changed them. Or perhaps, after everything they had endured, the promise simply slipped from memory. The myths do not blame anyone in particular. They present it as a tragic mistake. And sometimes the smallest moments create the greatest consequences. Far away in Athens, King Aegeus waited. The old king had experienced many years of uncertainty. For most of his life, he had wondered whether he would ever have a child to inherit his throne. Then, when hope finally arrived, it came with fear attached. He had only recently discovered his son, only to watch him sail away toward a danger from which no one had ever returned. Every day, Aegeus went to the high cliffs overlooking the sea. From there, he watched the horizon. The Aegean stretched endlessly before him, sparkling beneath the Mediterranean sun. Ships appeared in the distance from time to time, their sails catching the wind as they traveled toward different islands and distant shores. Each one brought a moment of possibility. Could this be the ship? Could this be his son? Could Theseus be coming home? The waiting must have felt endless. A king who had commanded armies and ruled a city was powerless against the uncertainty of the sea. All he could do was watch and hope. Finally, a ship appeared. At first, it was only a small shape against the horizon, a dark silhouette moving slowly across the water. As it came closer, the details became clearer. The shape of the vessel, the movement of the sails, the familiar outline of an Athenian ship. Aegeus looked carefully, and then he saw them, the black sails. In that moment, the king believed he had lost his son. The legends tell us that grief overwhelmed him. Unable to bear the thought that Theseus had been killed by the Minotaur, Aegeus threw himself from the cliffs into the sea below. The waters where he fell were later called the Aegean Sea, forever connected to the memory of the king who waited too long for good news. It is one of the saddest moments in Greek mythology. A father and son, separated for most of their lives, were finally only moments away from being reunited. The hero had succeeded. The impossible had been accomplished. but a forgotten promise and a distant sail changed everything. When Theseus arrived in Athens and learned what had happened, the joy of victory was mixed with deep sorrow. He had returned as a hero, but the person who had waited longest to see him was gone. This tragedy became an important part of the legend of Theseus because it revealed something the Greeks often emphasized in their stories. Heroes could defeat monsters. They could overcome impossible challenges. They could change the fate of kingdoms. But they could not always escape the consequences of human mistakes. The story of Theseus was never only about victory. It was also about responsibility, about choices, about the fragile moments that shape a person's life. Despite his grief, Theseus now had a new role to accept. He was no longer simply the son of Aegeus. He was the ruler of Athens. The people who had once feared the future now looked to him for leadership. The young man who had left as an unknown traveler had returned as a legendary hero. And although his journey had brought great sorrow, it had also opened a new chapter for Athens. The age of Theseus had begun. The arrival of Theseus in Athens was a moment filled with emotions that seemed impossible to separate. There was celebration. There was relief. There was grief. The people had gained their greatest hero, but they had also lost their king. The same ship that carried news of victory also carried the sorrowful truth of Aegeus' final moments. The Minotaur had been defeated. The tribute to Crete had ended. But the old king who had waited so patiently for his son would never see him return. For Theseus, the joy of coming home was forever connected with the pain of losing his father. Yet a kingdom could not remain without a leader. Athens needed stability. It needed someone who could guide the city forward. And so, Theseus accepted the responsibility that had been waiting for him since the moment he lifted the great stone in Troezen. He became king. The transition from wandering hero to ruler was one of the most important transformations in his legend. Many myths celebrate heroes who defeat monsters or accomplish incredible feats. But Greek storytellers often asked a more difficult question. What happens after the adventure ends? A person may possess great strength, courage, or cleverness, but ruling a kingdom requires different qualities. A king must listen. A king must make difficult choices. A king must bring people together. According to legend, Theseus worked to transform Athens from a collection of separate villages into a stronger and more unified city. One of the greatest changes associated with his reign was called the synoikismos. The word means something like bringing together into one home. The story says that before Theseus' time, the communities surrounding Athens operated separately. Each village had its own leaders, traditions, and local concerns. Theseus supposedly encouraged them to unite under one central government in Athens. The historical reality of this process is uncertain, and it likely developed gradually over many generations. However, the myth reveals what later Athenians admired about their legendary king. They imagined Theseus not only as a warrior, but as a builder. Someone who created unity from division. Someone who helped shape the identity of Athens itself. The legends also connect Theseus with the creation of the Panathenaic festival, one of the most important celebrations of ancient Athens. In this festival, citizens gathered to honor the goddess Athena, the protector of the city. The streets filled with music and processions. Athletes competed in contests of strength and skill. Offerings were carried to sacred places. The entire community came together in shared celebration. Whether Theseus truly established these traditions is impossible to know, but his association with them shows how later Athenians viewed him. He represented the beginning of their city. a bridge between the legendary past and the world they knew. As king, Theseus also faced challenges beyond ceremonies and traditions. A ruler could not simply rely on past victories. Defeating the Minotaur had earned him respect, but governing Athens required patience and wisdom every day. The same qualities that helped him survive the labyrinth became important in leadership. He had learned to think before acting. He had learned that courage required preparation. He had learned that even heroes needed help from others. But the story of Theseus also carried warnings. The Greeks did not portray their heroes as flawless figures. Theseus could be brave but impulsive, generous but sometimes careless. A great leader could still make mistakes. This complexity is part of what has kept his story alive for thousands of years. He was not a perfect king from a perfect world. He was a human figure placed in extraordinary circumstances. During his reign, Athens continued to grow. The city expanded its influence. Its people developed stronger connections with surrounding regions. The stories of Theseus spread throughout Greece, transforming him from a local hero into a symbol of Athenian identity. Generations later, Athenians would look back on him as the founder of their heroic age. They would honor statues of him, tell stories of his adventures, and remember him as the man who freed Athens from the terror of Crete. But a king's journey is never simple. The same ambition that pushes someone toward greatness can also lead them into danger. After becoming ruler of Athens, Theseus would continue seeking challenges beyond his city's borders. He would form alliances, travel to distant lands, and become involved in new adventures that tested both his courage and his judgment. The hero who had once walked alone along a dangerous road now carried the weight of an entire kingdom. The sword that proved his identity was no longer just a symbol of his birth. It was now the responsibility of leadership. And as the years passed, Theseus would discover that ruling a kingdom could be every bit as challenging as facing a monster in the darkness. After becoming king of Athens, Theseus entered a new chapter of his life. The young man who had once walked alone along dangerous roads was now responsible for an entire kingdom. The sword that had proven his identity was no longer simply a reminder of his father. It had become a symbol of leadership. Yet Theseus was never the kind of person who remained safely behind palace walls. The same curiosity and courage that had pushed him toward the labyrinth continued to guide him. To the Greeks, heroes were not meant to spend their lives surrounded by comfort. They were expected to test themselves, explore the unknown, and bring order wherever chaos existed. And so, even after becoming king, Theseus continued seeking adventure. One of the most famous stories connected to his reign was his friendship with another legendary hero, Heracles. Heracles, known in Roman mythology as Hercules, was already famous throughout Greece for his incredible strength and the completion of his legendary labors. He was the hero who defeated monsters, captured impossible creatures, and performed feats that seemed beyond human ability. The Greeks often imagined Theseus and Heracles as two different kinds of heroes. Heracles represented unmatched strength. Theseus represented courage combined with intelligence. One relied on power, the other relied on both power and careful thinking. Together, they became symbols of different paths to greatness. Ancient stories say that Theseus admired Heracles and hoped to follow in his footsteps. Like many young heroes of Greek mythology, he wanted to prove himself not only as a ruler but as someone worthy of remembrance. Yet Theseus' adventures were not limited to defeating monsters. Some of his greatest challenges involved people, rival kings, dangerous warriors, and complicated alliances. One story tells of Theseus' journey into the region of the Amazons. The Amazons were described by Greek writers as a powerful nation of warrior women living beyond the familiar Greek world. They were skilled horse riders and fierce fighters, often portrayed as equals or even superior opponents to Greek heroes. Modern historians debate whether the Amazons were based on real groups of warrior women, perhaps influenced by nomadic cultures around the Black Sea, or whether they were entirely mythical. To ancient Greeks, however, the Amazons represented a fascinating challenge. They were both admired and feared. According to the legends, Theseus traveled to the land of the Amazons and encountered their queen, Hippolyta. The details vary depending on the storyteller. Some versions describe Theseus defeating the Amazons and taking Hippolyta as a prize. Others describe a romance between the two, where Hippolyta willingly joined him and traveled back to Athens. Still others tell of conflict between Athens and the Amazons after their queen was taken away. Like many Greek myths, the story reveals more about the values and concerns of the people telling it than about historical events themselves. It explores themes of power, loyalty, love, and the challenges created when different worlds meet. According to one version, Theseus and Hippolyta had a son named Hippolytus. The boy would later become the center of another tragic story, showing once again that even legendary heroes could not escape sorrow. But before those events unfolded, Theseus continued to shape Athens. The city grew stronger during his legendary reign. He became associated with laws, traditions, and the organization of Athenian society. Later Athenians looked back on him as a figure who helped create the foundations of their identity. In their imagination, Theseus was more than a king. He was a founder, a protector, a symbol of the moment when Athens began to see itself as something greater than a collection of villages. Yet the same qualities that made Theseus admirable also carried dangers. His confidence sometimes became recklessness. His desire for adventure sometimes caused him to neglect responsibilities. The Greeks often used heroes like Theseus to explore the balance between greatness and human weakness. A person could be brave without always being wise. A person could accomplish incredible things and still make painful mistakes. This complexity made Theseus feel more real than a simple character who always succeeded. He was not remembered because he was perfect. He was remembered because his life contained both triumph and tragedy. As the years passed, stories of Theseus spread throughout Greece. Travelers carried his name from city to city. Poets sang of his battles. Artists carved his victories into pottery and stone. Parents told children the story of the young man who lifted the great stone, defeated the Minotaur, and returned home as a king. But behind every legend was still a human being. A man who had lost his father. A ruler trying to guide his people. A hero searching for meaning beyond his greatest achievement. The Labyrinth had tested Theseus' courage. The crown tested his wisdom, and the adventures that followed would test his heart. Because the greatest challenges of a hero are not always found in dark corridors or beneath ancient palaces. Sometimes they are found in the choices made after victory has already been won. Among all the adventures connected to Theseus, few are as mysterious and debated as his encounter with the Amazons. To the ancient Greeks, the Amazons represented a world beyond the familiar boundaries of their own civilization. They were described as a nation of fierce warrior women who lived far away from Greece, beyond distant mountains and across unfamiliar seas. They rode horses with unmatched skill. They carried bows and spears. They trained for battle from a young age. And they were said to live according to their own laws, separate from the kingdoms of Greek men. The stories of the Amazons reveal the imagination of the ancient world. They represented both admiration and fear, the idea of a society that was powerful, independent, and completely different from the one Greek audiences knew. For centuries, historians wondered whether the Amazons were purely mythical or whether their stories were inspired by real groups of women warriors. Some scholars have suggested that Greek travelers may have encountered warrior women among the nomadic peoples of the Eurasian steppe, including groups where women sometimes participated in hunting and warfare. Archaeologists have discovered graves in regions associated with ancient nomadic cultures containing weapons alongside female remains, showing that women warriors were not simply a fantasy. Whether these discoveries connect directly to the Amazon legends remains uncertain, but the stories endured, and Theseus became one of the heroes most closely connected with them. According to the myths, Theseus traveled beyond Greece and encountered the Amazons during one of his adventures. At the center of the story was Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. Like many legendary figures, Hippolyta appears differently depending on the storyteller. In some versions, she was a powerful opponent who challenged Theseus in battle. In others, she was a respected warrior who became connected to him through friendship or romance. The details changed over time, but the central idea remained. Theseus, the hero of Athens, had encountered a civilization unlike his own. The meeting between Theseus and Hippolyta was not simply a battle between individuals. It represented a meeting between two worlds. Athens represented the Greek city-state, with its councils, traditions, and social structures. The Amazons represented independence, wilderness, and a society organized around different values. Ancient storytellers often used encounters like these to explore questions about identity. What happens when two different cultures meet? Can opposing worlds understand each other? Can admiration exist between rivals? These questions helped make the stories of Theseus and the Amazons memorable. In one of the most famous versions, Hippolyta eventually traveled with Theseus back to Athens. Some stories say she came willingly. Others say she was taken against her wishes. The difference is important because it changes the entire meaning of the tale. In some versions, their relationship becomes a story of alliance and affection. In others, it becomes a story of conflict and betrayal. Greek mythology often contained multiple interpretations because these stories were shaped by generations of storytellers. After arriving in Athens, Hippolyta became part of the city's legendary history. The myths say that she and Theseus had a son named Hippolytus, a character who would later become famous in his own tragic story. But before that tragedy unfolded, another conflict arose. The Amazons were not willing to simply forget their queen. According to some accounts, they traveled to Athens to reclaim Hippolyta or to confront Theseus over what had happened. The result was a legendary battle between the Amazons and the Athenians. Later Greek writers imagined the conflict taking place near the very heart of Athens. They described fierce warriors crossing great distances to reach the city, determined to restore their honor. The Athenians, led by Theseus, fought to defend their home. Although the details are likely mythical, the story became an important part of Athenian identity. Ancient Athenians even included images of battles with Amazons in their art and architecture, using them as symbols of civilization overcoming chaos. Yet the Amazons were not always portrayed simply as villains. Greek artists often depicted them as noble opponents, brave, skilled, and worthy of respect. Their strength made Greek heroes appear even greater. After all, defeating a weak enemy proves little. A true hero is tested by a worthy opponent. The stories surrounding Theseus and the Amazons reveal the complicated way the Greeks viewed heroism. A hero was not just someone who defeated enemies. A hero was someone who entered unfamiliar worlds, faced uncertainty, and returned changed by the experience. Theseus had already walked the dangerous road to Athens. He had entered the Labyrinth. He had defeated the Minotaur. Now he had encountered a people whose way of life challenged everything he understood. But the adventures of Theseus would not end with the Amazons. As his legend grew, so did the number of stories surrounding him. Some celebrated his courage. Others warned of his ambition. Because like many heroes of Greek mythology, Theseus discovered that victory could bring new challenges. And sometimes the most difficult battles were not fought against monsters or armies. They were fought against the consequences of one's own choices. The legends of Theseus do not end with his victories. They do not end with the defeat of the Minotaur, the founding of Athens, or the adventures that carried his name across Greece. Like many heroes of ancient mythology, Theseus discovered that the greatest challenges were not always found on battlefields or in dark labyrinths. Sometimes they came from within his own family. One of the most tragic stories connected to Theseus involves his son, Hippolytus. The story begins with Hippolyta, the Amazon queen who had become connected with Theseus in the legends of his adventures. Different versions of the myth tell different stories about what happened to her. In some, she died during the conflict between the Amazons and Athens. In others, she remained with Theseus for a time. Eventually, Theseus became connected with another woman named Phaedra. Phaedra was the daughter of King Minos of Crete. This connection created a complicated link between the family of Theseus and the royal house of the very kingdom that had once demanded the Athenian tribute. The hero who had defeated the Minotaur became connected by marriage to the family of the man who had created the challenge that made him famous. From this union came a new chapter in the story. Phaedra became the stepmother of Hippolytus. Hippolytus was unlike his famous father. While Theseus was known for adventure, politics, and battle, Hippolytus was known for his devotion to the goddess Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and the wilderness. He loved forests, animals, and quiet places away from the noise of cities. He rejected many of the pleasures associated with royal life and devoted himself to a life of discipline and simplicity. In some ways, Hippolytus represented the opposite of Theseus. His father sought challenges among people and kingdoms. Hippolytus sought peace among nature. Yet his devotion created conflict. The Greeks believed that the gods demanded respect, and neglecting a deity could bring serious consequences. Hippolytus honored Artemis above all others but refused to honor Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire. To Aphrodite, this rejection was an insult. The goddess decided that Hippolytus would learn the power of the feelings he had dismissed. According to the myth, Aphrodite caused Phaedra to fall deeply in love with her stepson. The feeling was unwanted and painful. Phaedra understood that such love could never be accepted. She struggled with shame and fear, attempting to hide what had happened within her heart. But secrets rarely remain hidden in Greek tragedies. Eventually, the truth was revealed. Different versions tell the story differently, but in many accounts Phaedra confessed her feelings, either directly or through a message. Hippolytus rejected her and was horrified by the situation. The young man who had dedicated himself to purity and discipline suddenly found himself caught in a terrible conflict. Phaedra, overwhelmed by shame and anger, accused Hippolytus of behaving improperly toward her. When Theseus heard the accusation, he believed his wife. The decision was devastating. The same king who had once listened carefully before acting now responded with anger and grief. As a father, Theseus was wounded. As a husband, he felt betrayed. Without fully knowing the truth, he called upon the power of the gods to punish his own son. According to the myth, Theseus prayed to Poseidon, the god of the sea, who had promised to grant him 3 wishes. The god answered. As Hippolytus drove his chariot along the coastline, a terrifying event occurred. A sea monster rose from the waves, frightening his horses and causing them to lose control. The chariot crashed. Hippolytus was thrown from it and mortally wounded. Only later did Theseus learn the truth. His son had been innocent. Phaedra's accusation had been false, and the tragedy had been caused by misunderstanding, pride, and the influence of forces beyond human control. The story ends with sorrow rather than victory. Theseus, who had defeated monsters and saved cities, could not undo the consequences of his mistake. Hippolytus, who had tried to live a life of virtue, became a victim of a conflict he never created. And Phaedra, who had been caught between desire, shame, and fear, also met a tragic end. The story of Hippolytus reveals another important theme in Greek mythology. Heroes are powerful, but they are not all-knowing. Even the greatest figures can make decisions based on incomplete information. Strength cannot always solve problems. A sword cannot defeat grief. Courage cannot always prevent loss. For the ancient Greeks, tragedy was not simply about sadness. It was about understanding the limits of human power. Theseus had spent his life overcoming impossible challenges. He lifted the stone. He defeated the Minotaur. He built a kingdom. But he could not escape the consequences of being human. The tragedy of Hippolytus became one of the stories that reminded later generations that wisdom and patience were just as important as bravery. A hero must not only know how to fight, a hero must know when to listen. And sometimes, the hardest battle is the one fought against one's own anger and pride. As the years passed, Theseus became one of the most famous heroes in Greece. His name was spoken throughout the cities and islands of the ancient world. People remembered the young man who had defeated the Minotaur, the king who united Athens, and the warrior who faced challenges that seemed impossible. But even legendary heroes needed companions. Among the many figures connected to Theseus, one friendship became especially famous. It was the friendship between Theseus and Pirithous. Like many stories from Greek mythology, the details of their first meeting differ depending on the ancient source. Some versions describe them as rivals who first tested each other's strength before becoming close friends. Others portray their friendship beginning after an act of admiration between 2 powerful warriors. Regardless of how they met, the central idea remained the same. 2 extraordinary men recognized something remarkable in each other. Pirithous was the king of the Lapiths, a legendary people from Thessaly in northern Greece. Like Theseus, he was described as brave, ambitious, and eager for adventure. The 2 heroes shared many qualities. They were fearless. They sought challenges. They believed they were capable of achieving things beyond ordinary men. At first, their confidence brought them closer together. They admired each other's courage and strength. The Greeks often celebrated the idea of friendship between heroes. In a world filled with danger, a loyal companion could be as valuable as any weapon. A friend could provide advice. A friend could offer support. A friend could stand beside you when facing the unknown. The friendship of Theseus and Pirithous became an example of this heroic bond. Together, they participated in adventures and battles, building a reputation that spread throughout Greece. One of their most famous adventures involved the centaurs. The centaurs were mythical creatures with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a horse. Greek stories often portrayed them as wild and unpredictable beings, representing the struggle between civilization and uncontrolled instinct. However, not all centaurs were considered dangerous. Some were wise and noble, such as Chiron, the famous teacher who instructed many Greek heroes. The conflict involving Theseus, Pirithous, and the centaurs began during the wedding celebration of Pirithous. The Labyrinth king had invited many guests, including centaurs, to celebrate his marriage. At first, the gathering was peaceful. Music filled the halls. Food and drink were shared. Friends and allies came together to honor the occasion. But as the celebration continued, tensions grew. The myths describe the centaurs as becoming overwhelmed by wine and losing control of themselves. Their behavior became violent, and they attempted to disrupt the wedding. What followed became known as the battle between the Labyrinths and the centaurs. The conflict represented a familiar theme in Greek mythology: order versus chaos, civilization versus wildness, self-control versus uncontrolled desire. Theseus and Pirithous fought alongside the Labyrinths, helping defend the wedding and restore order. The story became popular because it showed heroes using their strength not simply for personal glory, but to protect their allies. Artists later depicted battles between Greeks and centaurs as symbols of humanity overcoming disorder. Images of these conflicts appeared on temples, pottery, and sculptures. For ancient Greeks, the centaurs represented the dangers that existed when people abandoned reason and gave themselves completely to instinct. Yet the friendship between Theseus and Pirithous also revealed another side of heroism. Great confidence can become dangerous when it turns into arrogance. The two heroes had accomplished many impressive things, and their victories increased their belief that nothing was beyond their reach. Eventually, their ambition led them toward one of their most famous and most reckless adventures. The two friends decided they deserved wives worthy of their status. Not ordinary marriages, not ordinary lives. They wanted to pursue women connected with the divine. According to the legends, Pirithous chose Persephone, the wife of Hades and queen of the underworld. Theseus chose Helen, the daughter of Zeus and one of the most famous women in Greek mythology. At this point in the story, Helen was still young, long before the events that would later lead to the Trojan War. The plan was extraordinary and dangerous. To take Helen required breaking into a powerful kingdom. To take Persephone required traveling to the realm of the dead itself. The idea showed both the courage and the foolishness of the two heroes. They had defeated enemies. They had survived battles. They had earned their reputations. But they had also begun to believe that their abilities had no limits. The ancient Greeks often warned against this kind of pride, which they called hubris. A person could be great and still fall. A hero could be brave and still make terrible choices. The friendship of Theseus and Pirithous began as a celebration of loyalty between equals. But their desire to challenge even the boundaries between the mortal and divine worlds would soon lead them into their greatest mistake. Their next journey would not take them across a battlefield or into a monster's lair. It would take them beneath the earth itself, into the kingdom of the dead. The story of Theseus is a story of remarkable beginnings. It begins with a hidden sword beneath a stone. It continues with a young man traveling a dangerous road, defeating criminals, and discovering his true identity. It reaches its greatest moment inside the darkness of the labyrinth, where Theseus faced the Minotaur and returned victorious. But like many heroes of Greek mythology, Theseus' story does not end with triumph. The same qualities that made him extraordinary also led him toward difficult choices. Courage became ambition. Confidence became pride. The desire for adventure became a willingness to take risks that affected others. As the years passed, Theseus grew older and his legendary adventures became memories. The young hero who had once entered Athens carrying a sword and a promise became a king carrying the responsibilities of an entire city. Yet ruling Athens was not always peaceful. The myths describe disagreements, conflicts, and political struggles that weakened his position. A hero who had once united people now found himself facing division. This was a common theme in Greek storytelling. The world of heroes was never permanent. Great achievements could be forgotten. Kings could lose their power. Even the strongest people could eventually face change. One of the greatest challenges came after Theseus had left Athens for a time. During his absence, the city experienced turmoil. Different groups competed for influence, and some stories suggest that Theseus' rule became increasingly unpopular. The details vary greatly depending on the source, but the overall message remains consistent. The hero who had built his reputation through actions struggled with the complicated world of politics. Battling a monster was simple compared with managing the disagreements of thousands of people. A monster could be defeated with a sword. A kingdom required patience. Eventually, Theseus left Athens. Some versions say he was forced into exile. Others suggest that he departed willingly after recognizing that his time as ruler had come to an end. The once great king traveled away from the city he had helped shape. His final years became surrounded by uncertainty and sadness. One of the final chapters of his legend takes place on the island of Skyros. According to the myths, Theseus arrived there seeking friendship and perhaps a place of safety. The island was ruled by King Lycomedes, who welcomed him but did not truly trust him. The ancient stories differ about what happened next. Some say Lycomedes feared Theseus' influence and power. Others suggest that political concerns led to betrayal. Whatever the reason, the legends say that Theseus was killed on Skyros. The hero who had defeated the Minotaur and transformed Athens died far away from the city that remembered him as its greatest champion. For many years, his resting place was unknown. But centuries later, Athenians continued to honor his memory. In the 5th century BCE, the Athenian statesman Cimon claimed to have discovered the remains of Theseus on the island of Skyros and brought them back to Athens. A great tomb, known as the Theseus, was dedicated to him. Whether those remains truly belonged to the legendary hero is impossible to determine. But the act itself reveals something important. Athens wanted Theseus to belong to them forever. He was not remembered only as a king from the distant past. He was remembered as the personification of Athens itself. His story reflected the ideals that Athenians admired: courage, intelligence, unity, the willingness to face danger for the benefit of others. Yet his flaws were remembered too. The Greeks understood that heroes were complicated. A perfect person was not interesting. A perfect person could not teach lessons. Theseus mattered because he was both extraordinary and human. He could enter a maze no one else dared enter. He could defeat a creature no one else could defeat. He could inspire an entire city, but he could also make mistakes. He could act too quickly. He could misunderstand those closest to him. He could discover that victory does not guarantee happiness. That is why the story of Theseus survived for thousands of years. It is not only a tale about monsters and heroes. It is a story about growing up, about discovering who you are, about accepting responsibility, about learning that the greatest challenges are often not the ones we expect. The Minotaur was a monster in the darkness, but the later struggles of Theseus were battles within himself. By the end of his life, Theseus had become more than a character from an ancient legend. He became a symbol. To the people of Athens, he represented the moment when their city found confidence and identity. To storytellers, he represented the complicated nature of heroism. And to anyone who hears his story today, he remains a reminder that greatness is not measured only by victories. It is measured by the choices we make, the people we help, and the legacy we leave behind. The young man who lifted the stone in Troezen could never have known where his journey would lead. He would cross dangerous roads. He would sail across the Aegean. He would walk into the heart of a maze. He would become a king, and he would become a legend. But like all journeys, his eventually came to an end. The footsteps of Theseus faded into history. Yet the story remained. A story of courage, a story of adventure, a story of a hero who entered the darkness and found his way back into the light. Good night.